I had a prospective client talk with me the other day. His workers were being paid as contract labor, while as owner of the corporation, he was on payroll. He wanted to keep his employees as contract labor and on 1099s, not W-2s. I asked him why. He said they'd been that way from the beginning and he thought it was easier. I probed him in the following areas. First, who determines what work is to be done? And who will do it? He told me that he assigned the work, and that the worker he assigned it to had to do it. The worker couldn't hire a substitute, and in fact had to do the work at the time assigned. The worker had to do it how he was told to do it, and there were company rules to be followed on how to do it. I asked, did his workers have expenses that he did not reimburse them for? Tools, travel, other expenses. They didn't. I asked if the workers held themselves forth to the public to do the same job. Did they have business cards and other clients they did the same work for? They didn't, because they used company-owned and maintained equipment, and he would not allow them to use it on side jobs. I asked if the workers had any risk of loss. If a customer didn't pay my prospective client, did he not pay the workers involved? He laughed and said, not a chance. He had to eat it. I asked how his employees were paid. He told me it was calculated by the task completed, but paid bi-weekly. We then discussed other aspects. Did he actually have a contract agreement with his workers covering everything? He didn't. Did he pay vacation? He said 2 weeks of average earnings per year. Did his workers work every week, or was it an on-again, off-again basis? He was proud of the fact that his workers worked every week, and most of them had been with him since he started 4 years earlier. As a potential out, we discussed employers in the same industry, and did they treat their workers as contractors or employees? We determined that no competitor we knew of that let their employees use similar equipment as he did treated their workers as contractors. In fact, one of his major competitors was being sued by the government for treating their workers as contractors, even though the workers owned their own equipment. The government felt that that item alone did not outweigh the other items, just as we had been discussing. I told him he could talk to the state unemployment or labor law people and see what they said. Or I could do it for him. But that I knew that his workers would be classified as employees. There's also a Form SS-8 he can file with the IRS for determination. But that would be like waving a red sheet at a bull. We talked about the potential problems. I told him since he was a corporation and was registered with the unemployment department for his state because of his own payroll, that sooner or later he would be audited. The unemployment auditors will do single employee audits for exactly the reasons he was presenting to me. The auditor would want to look at all the checks he had written, and when the auditor found repeated biweekly checks to the same people, the audit would really heat up. And the same questions I would be asking would be asked along with many, many others. If his workers were found to be employees, the employment agency in his state would want all the unemployment taxes for the last 4 years. That was a minimum. The IRS could be brought in, and they would want all the FICA taxes and employee and employer taxes that were not paid in, along with penalties and interest. He might be able to get relief under Section 530, but that wasn't likely. Also, he'd have to pay all the federal unemployment tax at a 5.4% rate, since no state unemployment tax was paid at the time. That amounts to about $400 a year per employee, plus penalties and interest. One last point I made to him, because I've seen it before. It just takes one ex-worker to go down and file for unemployment. When his wages are not on file, it will trigger an immediate audit and everything could come tumbling down. So he was putting his future into the hands of one upset ex-worker. The real cost of doing it properly was just the unemployment insurance. And with his unemployment rate and history, his rate would drop a minimum very quickly to around $50 per worker per year. The employer's share of the FICA tax, he was already effectively paying to the employee as higher wages, because the worker had to pay both sides instead of just the employee's share. It would only work for a higher wage as a contractor. He has not made a decision yet, but I gave him a lot to think about.